Hello, my name is Sung Tieu. I'm an artist based in Berlin. I was born in an industrial town in Vietnam called Hai Duong. It's located in the north between Hanoi and the coast. But I immigrated to Germany when I was 5 with my mother because my father came to Germany in 1987 as a contract worker with the GDR. So I mainly grew up in Germany and wider Europe. And somehow my life has sort of been, in many ways shaped by these Cold War histories. I guess I'm interested in my biography as one that is connected to a wider history. I sort of want to self-inflict my own story with things that perhaps are more ambiguous, at times perhaps even controversial, because it's not a straightforward way, the way I tell my own biography. So they are in a way combinations of things. But for me, it's not necessarily about pure fiction or the pure invention of something that wasn't there. I'm actually trying to link things together to crystallize them out more clearly and for people to almost see the absurdity of these things. In cases where things are more ambivalent, I think that's when things are really interesting to me, because you can't even start from the position of there's one truth or there's one, real news. But there's only, different shades of telling that story. My research for No Gods, No Masters began in 2017 when I encountered a psychological operation by the US Army called Operation Wandering Soul. And as part of Operation Wandering Soul, the 6th Battalion of PSYOPs based in Saigon developed a recording called Ghost Tip Number 10. And with Ghost Tip Number 10, PSYOPs try to weaponize spirituality as part of their political war agenda. The spiritual anchor for the tape lies in the Vietnamese tradition that dead relatives should be buried close to their ancestors, as it is believed that their souls would otherwise never be left in peace but wander the earth restlessly. So, it's really important to actually bury the bones of your ancestors close to the family. So what happened was that PSYOPs created this 4-minute sound recording using Vietnamese actors, and they would also record voices of a child, and they interweave that with wind sounds, rustling. They also included Vietnamese funeral music to make these haunting tape that they would then broadcast via helicopters that would fly through the landscape of Vietnam. And they also had soldiers with backpacks, which looked like 6 speakers attached to the back of a soldier with a battery, and they would just stand in the landscape at night and broadcast this recording. Within my video work, I'm interweaving that ghost, which is actually one from 1969, with a perhaps more deeper anchored spiritual ghost that has been around for centuries within my own family, but also just within Vietnamese folk religion, where we pray for our ancestors to come back to life via a medium. So in my case, there is basically a ritual every time I return to Vietnam where my aunt believes that she has sort of supernatural powers, and she can basically host my dead grandmother, but also other gods and ghosts. So she becomes a medium through which I can talk to my dead grandmother and other gods that they call home. Within that video work, I'm sort of interested in how these ancient ghosts interweaves with Ghost Tip Number 10, but also more contemporary ghosts of, let's say, 2020, because most of the things my family actually prays for is connected to a quite capitalist surrounding that is happening in Vietnam right now. Essentially, they are praying for a stable income for me. They still pray for that I have a stable job and that I make a lot of money, that I get married and get children and have a stable family life that is, of course, very heteronormative and traditional, so to speak. My sound research really started with Ghost Tip Number 10 because I was really so interested and struck by that sound piece. I would really call it a sound piece because I think it was really interesting for me to judge it from a perspective of art in a way, as macabre as that sounds, I think it's actually quite interesting to analyze that. Just the way it is constructed and the way actually it is quite powerful in conveying its message. So I am hiding my sound source within my installations because that's essentially how Ghost Tip number 10 started off. It was played in the dark. You weren't sure where the sound was coming from, and it was really trying to perform a ghost also in its appearance or in its disappearance as well. So yes, that's how I started working with it. And for In Cold Print, the exhibition dealt specifically with the Havana Syndrome, another sound weapon, so one the US accused Cuba of having produced in 2016 to target US embassy staff based in Havana. And that sound weapon is also one that you supposedly can't hear. People speculated whether it was like a unknown frequency, whether it was microwaves, whether it was the pumping station of the hotel, or whether it was an external sound source that the Cuban government somehow placed somewhere that have caused this syndrome, so which manifested in brain concussions. For me, there is something interesting about sound that we actually know so little about it, really, and the way it impacts our brain. When I came to Germany, I crossed the forest from the Czech Republic to Germany, and it wasn't a hard border, so to speak. It was essentially just walking through the forest and not quite knowing when you are in the other country or not. And then we sought asylum. But at Nottingham Contemporary, at that exhibition called In Cold Print, the border is pretty much a hard border. It's one that really dominates the exhibition space. It creates sort of like this pathway, but also a kind of labyrinth through which you encounter the different works and the sound installation as well. But what I was interested in the Nottingham Contemporary show was also connecting the border through a material. Concretely, that was these helicopter landing mats that were created for the Vietnamese-American War by the Army Corps of Engineers. And these helicopter landing mats were once produced to land heavy vehicles on monsoon ground in Vietnam. They are sort of like rectangle metal grids that you can slot together to create like a field to land. And exactly those helicopter landing mats were then recycled to build large sections of the US-Mexico border wall. So a lot of these landing mats actually never left Vietnam. They were stored somewhere in America. And the Army Corps of Engineers decided to reuse them, and they built miles and miles of the US-Mexico border wall with it. Within the show, I was also just interested in revealing, on the one hand, that story, but also what happens when you turn something that was first lying flat on the ground, horizontally. What happens when you just turn that vertical, and instead of invading a country, you protect your borders. But for me, that is sort of a continuation of perhaps the same war. So I think also this convolution of what is protection and what is war is something that I became really interested in within that show. Another interesting aspect about the US-Mexico border war that I encountered through my research, that the Japanese internment camps from the 1940s, they actually used the fencing of these Japanese internment camps as well to build parts of the US-Mexico border war. So, and that relationship also to racism is really interesting, and how racism plays a crucial role in that border project. And I think through excavating these stories and understanding where the materiality of something like a border wall comes from and how they have traveled and manifest again, and actually still hold that same story, because it's literally the same material, how that can be visualized through something like a wall. And to me, the US-Mexico border wall is perhaps the most painful but also most honest memorial of the Vietnam War the Americans came up with so far, because it just continues the violence instead of putting it to rest and putting it as an official memorial to the people.